When people talk about Israel's founding movement, Zionism, it's often negative.
The Zionists!
You fucking pricks!
Because of the century-long conflict that's led to a difficult day-to-day life for many Palestinian Arabs. But Israel was also born as a safe haven for the persecuted and emerged as a beacon of democracy, humanitarian aid, and cultural triumphs. So unlike other complicated isms that are supported even with their flaws, why is it so challenging today to be proud of Zionism? That challenge is what this series will explore.
So I've always said, as a gay Jew, the progressive world, the left, whatever you want to call it, love me for my sexual orientation, but hate me for my Jewishness. And obviously that is not true across the board. You know, we have to try and be nuanced, but I would say overwhelmingly, being a Jewish Zionist means that I'm unwelcome in many leftist spaces. And that is particularly damaging because I'm also a gay man.
Over the last few years, the political climate and rhetoric in the US and around the world has become more and more polarized. 8 in 10 adults think debate is more negative and less respectful than in recent years, with 3/4 saying it's become less fact-based. It's gotten so bad that people can't even agree on how to disagree. The same study found that 61% of Americans give different meaning to the same racist or sexist words and language. Discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has also followed this trend, being reduced to a David versus Goliath story that pits Israel as Goliath, making it clear which side you should be on. Nobody roots for Goliath, except that there are also those who see Israel as David, a vulnerable state surrounded by historically hostile Arab nations. This good versus evil framework really resonates, especially with people sympathetic to progressive movements trying to uplift marginalized groups, including many Jews that feel deep compassion for Palestinians who've truly suffered for decades.
You know, we're not talking about sides, we're talking about people. And if we want to understand the fullness of the history, the wholeness of the history, then we have to understand kind of multiple perspectives on it.
The accepted term for this kind of solidarity is intersectionality, the concept of drawing connections between different groups of people struggling with discrimination, using overlapping experiences to understand the bigger picture of why people become marginalized. Many progressive movements that fight for discriminated groups have allied themselves with Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, who are subject to military control and don't share all the same rights as Israeli citizens. But in doing so, they've washed away the nuance, complexity, and context of the conflict, making any association with Israel just negative. In 2011, Occupy Wall Street supporters equated Zionists with the 1%.
You got the money! That's why you're fighting, Jewish man!
In 2014, the official platform of Black Lives Matter labeled Israel a genocidal state. In 2017, organizers of the Women's March on Washington, precursor to the Me Too movement and the largest single protest in American history, blamed Jews for historic exploitation of people of color. And in 2019, event marshals at the DC Dyke March.
In order to have the Jewish pride flag not be about Zionism, all you gotta do is just move the star.
So allies,
that doesn't feel hard.
I move this star. Move the star. Move the star.
For Israel supporters with a progressive streak, instances like these make them feel like an outcast in an unwelcome world, forcing a choice between embracing Zionism or the values driving progressive culture.
You can separate the sovereign state, the state policy, with just the concept of a modern Jewish state, which is a miracle. 2,000 years after expulsion, we are back in our indigenous homeland, being masters of our own fate. And that's amazing. But that doesn't mean we have to agree with every Israeli policy. That doesn't mean we necessarily have to feel a connection to, you know, Israelis or Tel Aviv. You know, I think we should. I think that it's important that I believe that Zionism is an integral part of the Jewish pride movement, personally. But there has to be nuance. You know, nothing is black and white.
Using social issues like race, privilege, wealth, and ethnicity to reframe the conflict is trending, but in portraying Israelis, Zionists, and Jews as one negative monolithic force, it rides a wave of classic anti-Semitic stereotypes. This dynamic has played out especially at universities, which serve as a lightning rod for the wider cultural conversation and where social activism is a huge part of the college experience. In the wake of protests sparked by George Floyd's death, Rose Rich, a college senior and vice president of USC's student government at the time, was criticized on social media for being outspoken on issues that alienate Palestinian Trojans. Within hours, Rose's Instagram account was hit with anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic attacks from the USC community. Fearing for her safety, Rose resigned from her leadership position, calling out the anti-Semitic culture that led to her decision. Rose's letter has circulated as a kind of bellwether for the state of Zionism on campus.
I went to the University of Glasgow, and every single day I faced a barrage of intense anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and I was the only out Jew, the only out Zionist, and it was incredibly difficult. And I experienced anti-Semitism from the lecturers, from my professors, from my peers, from organizations, and it really was a sink or swim moment. And at the same time, I had to fight because I could not sit back and allow my people to be denigrated without doing something.
So, intersectionality brings members of different identity groups together, and Zionists alone are being turned away? But if Zionist is an identity, just as race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, ethnic group, or political leanings are, then having to choose between Zionism and progressivism is actually a false choice. Because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not about indigenous people versus colonialists, people of color versus whites, or poor versus wealthy. The conflict is really about two peoples that each claim the same geographic area as their homeland, whose fight for safety and self-determination has led to a painful history of bloodshed and political tension. This series will help you see Israel's story in a realistic light by confronting the most extreme accusations head-on to find the nuance and historical complexity underneath. That way you, and only you, can decide where Israel and Zionism fit into your identity.